Good afternoon. Welcome to the October 26, 2021 Board of Police Commissioners meeting. We acknowledge on the traditional lands of Treaty 4 territory, a treaty signed with 35 First Nations across southern Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta and Manitoba, and the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and homeland of the Métis Nation. Some members of the board are attending the meeting today through video conferencing. I'd like to remind those members that to ensure your video camera and microphone are turned off, if you wish to speak, use the raised hand function to be placed into the speaking queue. And when speaking, remember to unmute your microphone and enable your video camera. I need a motion to approve the public agenda. Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. I'll call the agenda. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Can I also have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting held on October 4th, 2021? Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Thank you. Jada, Commissioner Yee, I think that was you.
That was me.
Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Carried. Our first report is PO 21-36, the Community Engagement Unit presentation. Chief, could I ask that you please introduce the report?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Mayor Masters and members of the Board of Police Commissioners. This presentation is really focused on the work that our Community Engagement Unit does. We have two presenters here today, Inspector Kelly Trithart, who's the inspector in charge of the Central District in Community Services, and so this certain section falls within that area. And we've got Sergeant Kelly Gorman here as well. Sergeant Gorman is the sergeant that runs the unit. So I'm not going to give a whole bunch of a preamble off the start. The Community Engagement Unit is a fairly new unit within our organization after some restructuring that we did a couple of years ago. And really their focus is out proactive, meeting with groups, doing proactive work in terms of crime prevention work with different groups and organizations, and building those meaningful relationships, engaging with youth, engaging with vulnerable people in our community. And I think this presentation that they'll walk you through will give you a good idea of that. So I'd like to turn it over to Inspector Kelly Trithart.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Masters and members of the board. I'm very excited to speak with you this afternoon about a hard-working unit in the Central District for the Regina Police Service, the Community Engagement Unit. This group of officers, they really hold a high value on their role, and in saying that, it's hard at times to pin down exactly what their role specifically is sometimes, as they take on so many things in uncharted territory. It is safe to say that they're heavily involved in the community, not only in the Central District but in all of Regina. So we're going to take a look at a few of the things that they do today. Certainly in the past years, community policing has been an important theme and philosophy for the approach of police in problem solving and in partnerships. And at the direction of Chief Bray in 2018, the Community Engagement Unit was developed to enhance the connection with our community, including the public and partners and agencies within the city. This unit is comprised of 6 uniformed officers. We have 4 constables, 1 corporal, and 1 sergeant. Note in the picture here, it looks like there's only 5 members. We have Constables Mac, Claude, Klemp, Corporal Laloche, and Sergeant Gorman. We still have 1 position that needs to be filled in our transfer date in the new year. So we're looking forward to that. The unit participates in a number of community outreach programs and collaborates with community stakeholders to respond and resolve community concerns. And although we were faced with challenges in COVID-19, these officers, they worked with a lot of community partners and attended community businesses and agencies, including places like the Warming Center in the North Central area, to help build on safety strategies and give guidance on law enforcement and public concerns. Certainly the pandemic that we're experiencing here, we're still participating in a number of community programs along with it occurring and working with agencies within the city. Really, the sky's the limit to the things that we've become involved in. On a day-to-day basis, the Community Engagement Unit receives calls and requests for many issues, and they're requested to reach out and provide information, give advice and presentations, or even just do welfare checks on individuals who may have been identified as being vulnerable or having just gone through a trying time. And although sometimes it's just a one-call thing or a one visit, other times after that first call or visit, our members may be connected with that individual for days or weeks or even months before that issue is resolved and before our involvement is no longer required. The members walk the beat and they bicycle, as well as they're available at the community office of the Mama-Weyatatin Center to allow the public to report incidents to police without having to travel outside of the North Central community. Our officers also jump in their marked police vehicle and attend to calls with other district patrol officers and attend to addresses by themselves. We're going to take a look at some of the programs and committees that our members are a part of. The thing that to remember here, it's really important, is that we're one spoke in a wheel of many other members of the community that collaborate to find that solution. So let's take a look at HUB. One of our 4 constables sits on HUB, and there's many other service providers at this table. This meetings, they're very important for those professionals sitting at the table who are able to share relevant information about specific cases that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. So as a result, when you have in-time and up-to-date relevant information, it's easier to get the appropriate help to individuals that are identified. Here, if you take a look at the main risk categories that create a discussion with the HUB table for potential clients, as you can see, and this list goes on longer than just the things named here, we can consider these things, and many times are going to overlap, where someone who is addicted to alcohol or drugs also has mental health issues and no longer has a permanent residence. This individual would be discussed, and all relevant information is shared about them to try and assist this client to begin a positive health lifestyle. Another thing we're involved in is the Housing Standards Enforcement Team, or HSET. Here we have a group made up of police, city bylaw officer, Sask Health Authority has an inspector, fire is there, social services, and they work together to try and address housing issues. I just sat in on a HSET meeting, and they really work well to identify houses that need attention and need to be cleaned up or fixed or even boarded up and demolished. It's a very daunting task sometimes, and it's important for this group to work together, staying on top of these housing issues. It's very challenging, and there's a lot of brainstorming that happens here. These members collaborate and really communicate very well, from what I can see. Certainly a big part of our community engagement unit is the presentations. These take a large portion of our members' time, and they do well, probably over 200 presentations in a year, and that's probably even low. We have a wide variety of audiences, from those preschoolers to adults in the workplace to seniors, and our topics are equally diverse, from information on the law to safety, information how to diffuse volatile behavior in the workplace, making good decisions, taking the right steps to report crime, and so on. Certainly this unit is depended on to provide a lot of information to many people in the course of a year. Another thing that just started up this year, it's a new initiative for 2021, is Copsicle, to work together with local businesses and provide a positive interaction with the community in outside parks and public areas. And during this interaction, the potential for discussion with people is really endless, from discussing policing in general, to recruiting, to reminding individuals about safety, to perhaps even connecting individuals with other agencies to assist them. This was a great idea brought on by one of our constables in the community engagement unit, and it seems to have been a real success in the last few months. Another thing that we looked at, and we haven't done within the last year because of the pandemic, is the positive ticketing. And really we're giving back either coupons or some kind of a reward for positive behavior, whether it's driving or just for not breaking the law or just having contact with police. And it went over really well in 2018. It was received very well. And we look at getting back into that once the pandemic is over. We have a lot of interaction with young people, with reading, and cops and readers was a big one that we participated in. It's a positive interaction where officers attend to libraries and read with students. And it provides a really good connection with them. As you can see, some of the responses from people thanking officers for attending and reading with them and really focusing on literacy. Along the same line is Building Ready Readers, where we partnered with the United Way and we visit preschool age children and read with them. And here we really try and stress reading as being important and also developing a good sense of comfort in communicating with the police officers so that they're more relaxed around police officers and able to communicate with them in a positive manner. And certainly we've heard of Coffee with a Cop. That's been very successful here. We attend to local restaurants and have coffee with members of the community discussing current issues. This is almost like a call-in show where people bring their issues to us and they talk to us about them, and almost always it ends up with us connecting with someone in another agency or just trying to deal with some good decision-making skills. Now, we haven't been involved in this 529 garage too much. It's a relatively new thing for us. It just began and started really getting some momentum before the pandemic, and it was stalled going through with all the restrictions. But it's a great way to curb bicycle thefts, and it's proven effective in some of the larger communities across the country. I know Vancouver has been very successful with this. And basically, we're able to register the bicycles, and if the bike is stolen, it's very easy to match it up to the owner. When the officer recovers the bike, all that contact information is there, and they can actually contact the owners right where they are with the bike out on the street or wherever they are. And finally, we're involved in many community events and make an effort to be seen in uniform and participate as much as possible. And we're received very well the majority of the time. If you take a look at some of the things that we participated in, certainly the list is endless there. And here is some other agencies that we've been involved with. It certainly does include everything that of all of our partners, and we keep adding to that list, but there certainly is a lot there that we've had contact with these agencies and different partners within the city. Very positive interaction to try and come up with a solution to problems. Certainly, we're committed to our mission at the Regina Police Service, and our vision of working together with community members remains vital. And hopefully now you have a little bit better idea of what our community engagement unit is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Tudart. Any members, thank you. Members of the commission, Councilor Bresciani, you go right ahead.
Thank you. I will move the report as well. So thank you for this, the great work that you do. It's important to our community. I just want to ask about some of the programs. Now, the hours that are worked in this unit are 8 to 5. Now, is there overtime that is incurred because there is a need to work in the evening at all, or is it? What is the reason that it's kind of the 8 to 5? That's my first question.
I'm going to let Sergeant Gorman answer that since he's the one receiving a lot of the reports there at the...
Excuse me. We do typically try to work within our normal working day. We are asked to attend to things outside of normal working hours. We do have a budget within the department, within our unit. Not a large budget of overtime, but we do offer that to the members to go out there. And often we will just, because of its importance, we'll just amend our shifts to work it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. because of the location at the Mama Waiteton Center, in the work that you do, and I know it's more with the engagement piece, would you see that, is there any after hours that people actually come to the Mama Waiteton looking for police service, not just for engagement, but in general? Is that been your experience at all, or is it, and I know maybe because you're in the engagement and not in the other piece, but it kind of, I think it overflows, right? Like if someone came and they wanted someone else within the unit, or they're committing a crime or whatever, of course it'd be reported and you'd handle. Is that, I guess, what would the process be if that happened?
It's funny, I kind of call us, we're the Swiss Army knife of the department, where we will find, we'll do everything. If, because we're so involved within the school and it's a multi-agency facility, like we'll come up often not even realizing we're there. I don't always wear a uniform, and sometimes we do encourage it. The Culture and Community Diversity Unit works with us. They don't wear uniforms. Between us, we do man, like Inspector Turner said, the desk per se. A lot of our stuff, more often though, comes from tasks that are sent to the district. It's hard to speak about things after hours. We do spend after hours there. But I think it sort of melts into the other community agencies that are within the school after hours. But they do, if often like the workers that work within there, they'll bring us stuff next day. We try and kind of stay afloat of things after hours, but you know, without being there all the time, it's tough to keep on it. I don't know if that makes sense the way I explained it, but.
Most of the time, I think that most of the things that are after hours where they adjust their shifts to are community-based things where they're participating in, whereas more of the things where they're responding to calls or where there's a criminal element, they deal with it during the daytime. However, sometimes they still do attend to calls with other officers or go by themselves to answer to criminal investigations, and that may take them over their time frame as well. But it does really kind of blend together.
Councillor, if I can just add to that, you know, I think if you think about the work that they do in our community engagement unit, a lot of it isn't necessarily quick priority response. Not to say that that doesn't happen, but for the most part, it tends to be longer term problems, or like Sergeant Gorman said, it's more project based. We're having problems with bin fires in an area. And so I know that we've got some incredible connections with Mama Waiteton, their security group, and so if there are after-hour functions happening, they have very quick access to us. In fact, we've got a really good working relationship that if they need us there, they can get us there just like that, just by calling and reporting the way anybody would in the city. So, you know, I don't think there's a deficiency there, and really the work that we rely on this team for is really that more kind of long-term problem-solving initiatives almost within that community.
Yeah. No, thank you for that clarity. Through you, Madam Mayor, I guess I've had, like a community organization had asked me one of the questions, why is it only the hours from 8 to 5? Because the community, being North Central, they know that if there is police in that area, that it would be, you know, a safe haven almost to go to, right? But if they're only open from 8 to 5, and that was the question, was then, you know, again, is it just back then obviously to calling 911 or whatever? So I guess the reason is that something that would be explored, or is there a reason that it's only there till 5?
Yeah, so I think what I would say to that as well is just, I mean, as you can see, this is a very small unit, 6 people. And so if we were going to try and staff something after hours, I mean, we couldn't have shifting pattern where they work only nights and evenings and weekends. So as soon as you get into switching from part of your work day or your work week is days and then part is nights, you almost need, I mean, that's how it works in patrol. So you always have people coming in nights, then people on days. When we made this change, we used to have an area that was called service centers, and we purposefully took most of those officers and redeployed them to the street because we were short resources on the street. So what we were left with was this concept of a community engagement unit that are really out there community, engaging with community organizations, businesses, doing presentations to school groups and those types of things. It's a small group of people that are just focused on this work. And so I think from a practical operational sense, if we wanted to expand it into the evening, we would need more officers to do that, and quite frankly, we don't have anywhere to take more officers from.
Thank you. In regards to the programs that you offer, I did follow the Copsicle this summer, and that was really good. I think that, I know someone had asked, like, how do we get them to come into the area? So I guess that's the question. So the reader program and that, how does that work? How is a request made?
For any program in general, we've really delved into a social media strategy this year. Melinda, who's the corporal, she really took it on, and with our media unit, developed a really strong media program with the intent of keeping people, building up that viewership or followership, whatever you call it, to get the word out that we're there. And initially, it was the core communities which we were focusing on, which was within our mandate and the strat plan and whatnot. And the need stretched really quickly to go through the whole city. So the easy answer would say follow us on Instagram or go to the RPS website, and with collaboration with our media unit, just to get the word out.
And I think nothing stops a community organization from requesting, saying, we had that happen this year where, in fact, was it in your area? There was a bike rodeo happening, and they requested, it happened in one of the South End wards, and there was a bike rodeo happening, and so they made a request of our police service. It would be nice to have a police presence here. They didn't specifically ask for community engagement, but that often is who we will refer to. So I think it's just as simple as making a request through, whether it's the website or directly to the unit.
Okay, great. I do think it's important just to have that presence, and I think, that piece where people feel comfortable. The last question I have is just in regards to when you do the speaking engagements and you had a list of the things that you do talk about. Because domestic violence, we are the highest province in all of Canada in that regard. Is there any opportunity to talk, even when you're speaking with the younger children or however it works, is that, about the whole thing about, being kind, and we don't, that, I'm not sure if, I know other cities have done things where they've actually spoken to men in general and taken that conversation there. But even we're thinking of younger, teens, thinking about respecting women, all those kinds of things. Like, is there...
We have, in fact, we some of our partners within the second stage shelters. We've done a lot of work with them where there's, the mother and the children are there, and a lot of times like new Canadians, and just instilling that idea of seeing the police in a uniform or not in a uniform is a good sign. We do a lot of work with those shelters, and I've spoken to our domestic violence coordinator with sort of developing a bigger piece of how to explain all that and keep it age appropriate.
Right. Yeah.
Just a little promotion for Kelly though too, because Kelly comes from an extensive background working in our Children's Justice Center and working in the area of violence, family violence, domestic violence, and has some incredible connections with Family Service Regina, for example. So we actually have a really good tie from that topic that you just raised to now community engagement and some of the work that we're doing there.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Commissioner Bucci.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a couple questions. First of all, government, I think it's your team play a vital role, especially in making sure that our community is safe. I just wanted to ask, how long has that vacant position been up for, and how has that maybe impacted your work, or is the position filled?
No, that position was a few months ago. The person left that position, and we do plan on filling it in the new year in January. We're going to keep it vacant now. Mostly made the decision because of resources, and we would have to take somewhere else to fill that position. And so now we're planning for it to be coming up here, and we had to use some of our people that are currently in the community engagement unit to take up different roles, but they've risen up and done that and taken on that responsibility.
Okay, so just to follow up again, so in terms of resources, is it budget or is it the hiring process? Is it what do you mean by resources?
I can take that question if that's okay, Commissioner Boucher. It really is about not wanting to take someone right now off the front line. Our frontline resources have been running fairly hot. Just because of the amount of work that there is out there. We've had this talk with the board many times. And so understanding that, this is an area where obviously they would love to have this extra person. And from time to time, we have areas within the police service where we may delay filling a position till the new year. That's when holidays start new and everybody's kind of schedule freshens back to normal. Towards the end of the year, we do definitely try and keep our resources on the front line as best we can. So it's really an organizational decision. It's not that we don't have the ability to fill it. We purposefully have not posted that position and won't fill it until January.
Thank you so much, Chief. That makes sense. And just to clarify as well, so does this fall under Superintendent Laurelie Davis's portfolio, or is this separate?
Yes.
Because I remember.
That's correct. It's under Superintendent Davies.
Oh, okay, good, makes sense. All right, no, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Boucher. Commissioner Bither.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I have two, it's more or less, I don't know whether these are questions, but I'm wondering about two things. First one is, are there any performance measures that are taking place in regards to this unit in terms of the effectiveness or change in strategy in terms of where the focus needs to? And my second question is, how is the unit's work is currently being prioritized based on different issues? I think, and Chief, you already talked about that. But broadly, my questions are in regards to the performance measures and how the work is being prioritized for this.
Well, all of our members are assessed each year, but as far as the actual information that we bring forward in our presentations and share with the community and the discussions that we have is really based on, we try and keep it as current as we can. So with the informal things like coffee with a cop and those discussions when our officers are reading with children, it would just be an issue that's a current issue or a problem that's currently happening with those individuals. As far as things that we do in our presentations, we really try and reflect on the needs of the audience that we're talking to. So if it is some women at a shelter, it would be related obviously as current as we can to domestic violence and all the different elements of crime that lead to that, or whether it's in schools, maybe related to drugs. We try and keep it as current as we can and as relevant as we can.
If I can just maybe add a little bit to that. Commissioner Bither, we, as you know, we do a community perception survey every 2 years, and we do stakeholder outreach and consultation. So the answer to your question about performance measures, we don't have specific performance measures tied to this small unit. We do have performance measures tied to each police officer that works in that unit, and so they every year get their annual assessments. But we do consistently hear from our community of things that they want to see, and we've talked at this level about that before. Obviously traffic enforcement, police visibility in areas, those are things that they find important. But we also hear a lot of feedback about the need for people coming out and speaking to community groups, working with our community-based organizations. So the North Central Family Center, All Nations Hope, Circle Project, a lot of these organizations, Carmichael Outreach, those are day-to-day contacts that our community engagement unit has which I think if we left it on the shoulders of patrol officers, their mandate looks so different and they're so responsive to those calls that work wouldn't get done. So no, we don't have specific performance measures, although I think we have key indicators that our community is looking for this type of unit in the community. And in terms of prioritization, I really think it comes down to that balance between what I would call proactive or coordinated policing efforts with other community groups. So things like HUB, Housing Standards, that's real meaningful, proactive work that they do, along with, the lighter cops and readers, Coffee with a Cop, and then some of those lectures and discussions and presentations that they do, schools, senior centers, and community organizations and community groups, if that answers your question.
No, it does. But I do have a follow-up question though. So you both mentioned Coffee with Cop. Is in your viewpoint, is the perception about the community engagement unit is about more of a cop, or if you're inviting audience for Coffee with the Cop, or is it perception is that it is going to a principal's office and being reprimanded for something?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Sure, yeah. So I'll give you my perception, and I've participated in many of these events when we've had them. We've been doing them now for a number of years, and it really is incredible to see people that purposefully will come. If we say we're having it at this certain location in the city, people will come from another area of the city because they want to sit down at a table and they want to have a conversation with a police officer about a problem that they're having in their neighborhood. Or maybe they want to get hired as a police officer and they want to learn more information. And so we have not ever seen a situation where it was adversarial or a challenging situation. In fact, it's just the opposite. I know many times we say it goes from 11 until 1, and at 1:45 there's still a few officers there because there's a lot of people that have been waiting to sit and talk with an officer. So it's a neutral location. You're not at a police service. You're not coming to their home responding to a call. You're just giving them access to police officers in a very positive, proactive setting.
Thank you, Chief. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions from the commission. Chief, I just have a question for you. In terms of strategy, and I think you've alluded to it, I'm just going to ask it directly. This was created at your direction a few years ago. Strategically, why?
Well, I think that's a little too much credit for me. I don't think it was at my direction. I was the chief of police at the time. I think really what we saw was that we had two what we called service center units. If you go back in history, one worked out of Scott and one worked out of the Al Ritchie area. And they had front desks there. People could come in and report crime. They could do all of that. And what we saw was it wasn't really busy with people coming in and reporting crime. It was busy with community engagement, people just wanting to talk to police officers, talking about challenges in the neighborhood, and it was about visibility in the neighborhood and those types of things. And so what happened over time is those officers just basically became more police officers to respond to calls for service. So they were doing less community engagement and more listening to the radio and responding to calls for service, not even necessarily within that small assigned area. And so when we did the work that we did through patrol workload assessment, of operational review, and we decided we were going to redeploy a large number of police officers, 20 to be exact, back to the street, we didn't want to lose sight of the importance of community engagement. And all the things that Inspector Tridhart and Sergeant Gorman have talked about today really illustrate there's a need, there's a craving in our community for our officers to be out there in a positive, proactive way, or to sit as a community entity as part of a group. So we thought, let's put a number of officers there, and we've actually reduced that. We originally had 8 in that group when we first stood this up about 3 years ago. We're down to 6 now. And again, that's trying to find a way to have enough officers there to keep busy and do this work, but then recognize we can use the other officers in an operational fashion out on the street.
Right, again. And in your opinion, in terms of outcomes, I know Commissioner Bither referred to it as performance measurements, but in terms of outcomes, the goal is
goal is community engagement, building relationships, so I'll give you a good example right now. Our community engagement unit are predominantly the officers that are going down and interacting at Camp Marjorie, because they've got the built connection with Carmichael instantly, and so the ability to work down there, interact with people, that's the nature of the work that they do, and so they spend a lot of time there. So when we have Hearts in the Park, or we have different events in the city, our community engagement unit, often they're on top of it, they're part of the planning committee, and they're really engaged in that work.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. We have a motion on the floor from Councillor Brashear Annie. I'll call the question. Anyone opposed to receive and file? Seeing none, carried. We'll now consider PO 21-37, monthly crime statistics from October of 2021. Chief, could I ask that you please introduce the report?
Yes, so our crime stat report, this is for up to and including the end of September 2021. And we've talked about this a lot at this forum and in these meetings, where in 2020, we saw some significant changes to crime and crime rate and trends that were happening in our city. And what we saw was that the crime rate declined in many areas, and a lot of the social challenges increased. And so we've been talking about that a lot. Throughout 2021, what we've seen is we started off fairly slow in terms of our crime rate, but things, as the world has somewhat opened up, as have crime rates returned back to closer to where they were pre-COVID and what those numbers look like. And so that gap between where we were and where we were at this time last year has been closing, and things are at this point pretty much flattened out. We're basically at the same point that we were at this time last year. So really what I'm talking about is if you look at our crimes against property, we've got an increase right now of 0.5% over where we were at this time last year. And our crimes against the person, we're so close that we can't even give you a differentiation one way or the other. So we're essentially at the same level that we were at this point last year. Now, again, putting that in context, last year's numbers were significantly down from historically where they've been, certainly not just the year before that in 2019, but where they've been over the last 4 or 5 years. So, the rate is still down from where it was overall, but we've met that plateau from where we were in 2020. Overall, if you combine both categories, we've got a very small 0.4% increase in terms of crime. There's a couple of areas where I just kind of dug into it a little bit deeper. If you see some increases, one of them is in the area of attempted theft of vehicles. Generally, we see a typical relationship between the amount of stolen vehicles we have in the city to the number of attempted theft vehicles. And so typically attempted theft makes up about 10 to 15% of the overall total theft of motor vehicles. That number dropped significantly during COVID, in both categories, but I would say really significant in the attempt theft of vehicles. 2020 had the actual lowest proportion of attempt thefts to thefts in the last 10 years. So again, we're returning where I would say is more closely tied to the pre-COVID numbers. And with regard to theft over 5,000, that's an area where we are seeing a bit of an increase. We've seen some thefts that have happened in areas involving tools. We've had skid steers stolen from construction sites. And so those larger thefts tend to be documented, obviously, as a theft over $5,000. Even when you're talking of a theft of tools, they can have significant value, and that accounts for some of the increase that we're seeing in that category. I will note that in the homicide numbers, this is the monthly statistical extract till the end of September 2021. So you'll notice the number for 2021 year to date is 8. Which is down from where we were at this time last year. We were at 10. Again, that's as of the end of September. Recently, as you're aware, we had 3 homicides that happened within 1 week. So our number currently is 11, and that will be reported on and reflected in next month's report and board meeting. And then at the back, as per normal, we've got the dashboards. I won't delve into it too much other than to say, with regard to drug overdoses, our strategic service area notified us that last week we were at the same number of overall fatal overdoses that we experienced all year last year. So that number, sadly, our city saw a week ago, knowing that we've still got a couple months left in the year. So sadly, our number of overdose deaths this year is going to be higher, potentially significantly higher than where we were at this time last year. That's our report in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Can I have someone make a motion to receive and file? Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Any questions for the Chief on the monthly crime stats? Councillor Bresciani?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. You kind of touched on the three things, which was the theft of auto, the increase there. I guess, what is the message that you would send if there was the reason for the theft? It is up 14%. Like, what's the reason? And would you say that, is it just, again, is it the keys in the car, or what's going on there through the chair?
Yeah, I don't think it's just the keys. I think it's really more about crimes of opportunity. Keys and running vehicles tends to be more of an issue in the colder weather. So I'm not going to say it's not an issue now, but it will continue to be, I think, messaging that we need to get out. But as the world opens up and you drive by the Southland Mall and the parking lot is absolutely packed with vehicles, that potentially means it's packed with opportunities for someone who's looking to steal from or steal a vehicle. And that's no different in any other, go to the Brant Center for a Pats game or whatever. And so, again, we just try and encourage people to take steps to protect themselves, knowing that not staying at home and not really restricting your movement like we did through COVID means that you're out and about in the community, and anytime that happens, obviously there's opportunities for someone to prey on you as a victim. And so things that you can do, parking in well-lit areas, making sure your doors are locked, no valuables visible in your car, those seem like very basic everyday things, but those truly are ways that you can ensure that you are less likely to be a targeted victim of crime. Maybe I'll just check with Deputy Chief Ray and see if I'm missing anything. No, it's all good.
Okay, thank you for that. Last question I have is just in regards to the number of homicides, in that fact that there's 8, but as you've indicated, we had 3 more this month, which takes us up to 11. A feed came across my Facebook where Montreal just had their 24th homicide. So you look at the size of Montreal compared to the size of Regina. I guess it's a worry, obviously, but I guess, what is your response to the reason or the amount that we've seen in our small city?
Sure. So I will tell you, and I've had this talk very recently with Superintendent Trent Stevely. We talked about the causes behind our homicides that are happening, and often people want to understand, are they, for example, these 3 that we recently had, are they related in some way? We have no reason to believe that they are related, but I will tell you that there are a couple of areas where homicides tend to fall within when we look at over the last few years, and those are drugs. So the involvement in and around and with drugs often can be a precipitating factor. Makes people more vulnerable, more likely to victimization, less in control of their actions, and those types of things, and domestic situations. And so while we've seen a significant increase that, I don't know that we can specifically point to and say it's directly related to COVID, we've seen an increase in the number of domestic situations. So one of the other areas in our crime stats this month that are up, and I had a note on, was kidnapping and forcible confinement. That's not an area that we talk about often and see often. And I would say the significant cause of the increase of that, when we look at the individual files, really appears to be domestic related. So if it's to do with custody battles over children, or like keeping someone forcibly confined as a result of a bad domestic situation that obviously goes awry. So drugs and domestic related reasons often can trace back to homicides tragically in our community.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Any other members of the commission have any questions about the monthly crime statistics? Seeing none, I'll thank you very much for the report, Chief, and to your staff. And I need a resolution for private session. Oh, I apologize. I need to vote on the motion. I'll call the question on the motion of receive and filing the report. Any opposed? Carried. A resolution for private session. I'm just going to look at Councillor Bresciani right now because she's in the room with me. Thank you. We're going to recess for 15 minutes. Chief will do a media scrum, and we'll be back here at 3 o'clock or 3:02.
Thank you.